and you have your regulars, and um, it is extremely interesting that it's the corner regulars do keep attracting the same kinds of people, and the ones who stick around fit in well with that vibe. Um, to me, it's a it. Somebody said parasocial. I would call it more of a parachurch kind of um, place. I don't know what you call it, is online space, and which to me means a higher standard should apply. This is a title I've been playing with for a while anyway, and it was kind of a video I didn't want to make because I kept putting it off because I've had so many people come, and we would try to have dialogue even privately, and you know um, and it would just not work because uh, in a sense you could say they just would give up on me. Um, because I am a difficult person, and I don't form friendships to um, scratch a personal itch. I legitimately want to try to get to know the people who become a friend. And it's like, yes, I will support you. I want to know more about you, and I'm not going to abandon you even if we disagree on something.
I
In
haven't given
exchange,
up
you'll
on
have to
you.
endure me. Huh? Say what, Claire?
I haven't given up on you, Mark.
No, I know you haven't. No, that's true. You haven't. No, I'm still not sure where we're at as people, but go ahead. Go ahead. I'm rambling, but I'm saying I'm a bit. I guess what I'm saying is it's there. The online space may be per. Maybe it can't be anything more than parasocial, as someone said in the chat. And if we're going to be, if it is to transition, it's got, if individuals may transition, because I think what we have a couple marriages in the corner that have resulted. Cassidy and I think a couple other people have gotten married. So some some relationships have progressed beyond the online social thing, but uh, I don't know. I'm probably not making
Well,
very
well,
much
I
sense.
think Chris Howard put it very well that you can have parasocial relationships that you do value, and if they suddenly, stopped appearing online anymore, you would miss them. But in a way, they're not that important. While valuable, they're not as important as your, real life relationships. Your wife, your, people who
Sure.
whose loss of well, if you lose a relationship, you'd be upset. So, but so therefore, online is where we get to act out our issues and inflict our personalities on anyone who's around to take it. And Chad, I thought, put it very well. He said, we almost have a duty to be more antisocial online than we are in real life, to make the most of our understanding of the situation. So, we can say more what we mean. And, because in a way, these people online, um, are in a way like family, because even if you don't like each other, you'll find yourself bumping into each other and in other channels that you both frequent, and it's kind of like family reunions. You might quarrel with each other, but at the end of the day, find yourself having to talk to each other in
I,
situations.
Yeah.
I, I think because you don't have the physical boundaries, the intellectual boundaries become much larger. I it feels like the online space is more of a spiritual space in many ways because it's largely disembodied. So it's a lot of disembodied intellect, perceptions of people, and yeah, I'll stop.
No,
Well,
I
I think
think somebody
maybe you
pointed
mean,
out.
Paul, that people can't punch you if you offend them, however much you offend them. They can't physically wring your neck, etc. But I think in the olden days, when people went on long train journeys, they probably used their fellow passengers as a form of entertainment and therapy, and they would, probably confide, a lot of very personal things that they wouldn't dream of talking to, confiding in their friends and family. Maybe it's kind of like that.
Maybe.
So I can punch you, but it's going to be a spiritual or psychological attack, which
Yeah,
is
but people
almost worse.
Let's
ahead.
hear from how you doing, Nathan? Hi,
people
Nathan.
always like to say, oh yeah, like people say things online that they wouldn't say to my face, but I'd be beating them up in person. But like, when's the last time you had a fight? When's the last time you hit a person in the face? Like, come on, let's not also pretend that in real life we're just going around like macho man beating people up because they disagree with us or something. Like, that's not how the world works either.
I'm a lady. I don't get into fights.
It's just, but I'm just saying it's not. I think it's actually the opposite. Like I find that in online spaces, particularly I would say around the TLC, there's some of the biggest crybabies, can't handle disagreements in the world I've ever met. And in reality, not that they would hit me, but they'd be unable to avoid hearing ideas they dislike. Whereas online, they can do that because they literally just filter everything, right? And then they remove themselves from hearing things they don't want to hear. They if they have the power, they mute and block and ban. And so I actually think it's the opposite, that rather than these spaces more reinforce people having ideas that they want, and it's not that they would hear those ideas they don't like and then beat people up in the real world. They would hear them and then realize they're dumbasses who don't know what they're talking about.
I think there's I mean, in the corporate world, there are ways of social retribution within an established social network where you can beat up on a person, or you can undermine a person socially if you are within their social network, that you cannot do in the same way in an online space. So, I mean, while it's not physical, I think the embodiment of the space creates more capacity for retribution. Therefore, therefore you are patrolling therefore people, in order to establish these boundaries, people are much more aggressive in their opinions. Like, people are not in the corporate space, for example, as outspoken or argumentative as you see in online spaces. And like,
Right.
this little corner is better than us. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. I think you're onto something. I think you guys are all saying something. You're helping me, so I appreciate it. I'm glad you brought up corporate. The corporate space is everyone's there. Really, you wouldn't be there if you weren't getting paid. You're there for economic benefit, right? And so it's definitely transactional. Family, church, true close friendships should be less transactional. And I think that's the passage that, when you go to the 1 Corinthians chapter 6 passage I read, Paul's pleading with the Corinthians to think of themselves, to be willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of the community as well as their own spiritual good. He points out the fact that you're disputatious means you're already defeated. That's a really interesting part of the passage. and and the thing is there's a way to have interesting, profound, substantive discussions without becoming ugly. And like the thing that what happened today, like I think Luke, you got, I mean, not Luke, Nathan, you got what, banned thrice? Three
Yeah, but
times?
I'm sorry, Luke monologued for I shit you not 30 minutes about like hypothetically how concerned he was about mean words and things. I'm like, how thin-skinned do you have to be to cry for 30 minutes about imagining scenarios where someone
I listened to it. He didn't cry. Let's be fair. He didn't cry, but he did go on,
There weren't
and then
tears,
he talked
like,
about Star Manning. I was expecting Star Manning and Steel Manning, and
Manning, like what?
you guys,
what was toddler?
it
Like,
didn't.
like gently stroke his butt or something. Like I don't know what the hell these people want, but they are children.
But people respond most to their own perceived weaknesses because you are hyper aware of areas you see are struggles in yourself. So, and it's a dumb jujitsu move when you say that, but it's also a reflection of their own inner struggle. And I think Luke is trying to. I think Luke can be judgy, and that's fine. I think, but he's aware of this, and he's trying to struggle with it and not do it. But I think it makes him hyper aware of it in other people, thus the rules. And I don't know. It's like, yeah, he has a channel. He can make up rules. That's why are we worried about that?
I'm not worried about it. I'm just saying I think the guy's a bit of a pussy for doing that.
Well, it's
That's fine.
It's just irritating to be talked at, and it's all nonsense anyway for a whole hour, and then, you know, finally you're allowed to speak, and then you have to take turns, and you're nannied. It's your turn now, and your turn, and your turn.
I tell you the one thing that did frustrate me about that was when the guy said an actual racist thing, right? About like he made this joke about drinking milk because only white people can produce lactase. I'd be surprised if the guy even knows what enzymes are.
Talking about Joseph.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
so then I was like, I made a joke, like I'm gonna touch my girlfriend's black tit because first off, it's funny because I know this guy can't like has never seen a woman in his life. But secondly, then he pretends he's like, oh, that's misogynistic and I'm offended. But then it's like, so you're pretending to be offended about that, but it's perfectly acceptable to you to be racist. And it's like I'm just putting together the.
I don't think he perceives it as racist.
Well, I think he.
I think straight up, he doesn't perceive it as racist.
Heading with my shin, you know, like what a fucking weak man. Like I hate these people who are like, I'm just gonna laugh with my gay little Raphael's painting in the background of Plato and Aristotle joking about drinking milk because I'm a white man. The guy looks like he can't do a single press up, can't run a mile, probably doesn't have a career that's worth anything to society, and he's on the internet talking about telos and other nonsense. Like, get a life, stop being racist, get off the internet.
I don't know. I don't want to. I don't. What a little I know about Joseph is that I think he may even be married. I think he's training to be a deacon.
Yeah, well, that explains a lot because he looked like
in the Orthodox Church. So yeah, I'm not. I like Joseph normally, but he went off on a tirade because what he thought was had to do with the stolen land part that came out on Friday live stream, and he went off on this weird Aryan thing.
Oh yeah, because that's what we need in America is more people who don't have actual jobs being deacons promoting racism whilst taking the money of the congregation. That is something society needs.
Well, I don't know any details about that. I don't know anything about that. Let's move on. I don't know about that. I think what I want, what I'm interested in is, see, you know, we're okay with those jokes, but we're not okay with your jokes. You know, this is where I think, I mean, we can either ban jokes, period, or we can learn to understand each other well enough so that we get each other's sense of humor without
it's what the humor is, though,
freaking
right?
out.
So
If there is humor, right? Oh.
my sense of humor is intolerant of like the butt of my jokes is Nazism, fascism, racism, things like that. Like I will use concepts like misogyny in my jokes to undermine and make fun of misogyny. So that undermined that what's being undermined in the jokes I'm making is misogyny and racism. The butt of the joke in the drinking milk is to promote racism, to promote racial segregation. So I first off, I don't find that funny, right? But I don't want to be in the in group with those people. I want to go, you're a scumbag for finding that funny and wanting to associate and be in a group of people who find it funny to make some kind of like weird hint that black people are inferior because they don't produce lactase. Meanwhile, you yourself have such good white genes that you can't even get a real job and have to become some kind of weirdo deacon.
I think there needs to be sufficient cultural, like, what does humor do? It takes something which is at sort of the edge of what it's acceptable to sort of play at the edge of what is acceptable and express the awkwardness of that thing being acceptable. Now, the problem is if the Venn diagram of cultural acceptance is so non-overlapping, there's no border to play on in humor. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
there's, and so, yeah, and basically it's definitely outgrouping because it plays on a common border within a culture. And so if you don't find it funny, it's because you don't understand where that border is. And you're then not in the group.
Explicitly reject weirdo racists, right? That's a possibility too. Like I understand that.
No, you just believe that the border is at a different place, and that is beyond the pale, as opposed to right at the edge.
20 years old, I was the guy drinking the milk and thinking that was funny, and I used 4chan. I was into all this stuff. I was racist. I used to listen to Wagner's Tannhauser and like the comments underneath, like we need to protect Europe, right? Shit like that. I know exactly where this guy's coming from and how he thinks. So it's not that I don't understand that that's there. It's not that I don't know where the southern border is. It's that I don't want to protect the southern border.
Could we pivot
go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering, can we pivot in a slightly different direction? And just maybe you could, I'm going to be really narcissistic and ask you guys to indulge me for a second. Why did what I say Friday trigger so many people? I don't know how much you guys saw, but if you get where I'm going with that, just run with it and tell me.
Do you mind if I take it first, Nathan, and then you, or would you like to go first?
Yeah, go.
So,
be it the Catholic thing or the stolen land thing.
No, I think it's the stolen land thing.
Pick your poison.
I think it's the stolen land thing and so how do we experience racism? I've experienced West Virginian racism and Austrian racism because I lived at least at the peripheral of both of those cultures. And West Virginia racism is very different from Austrian racism for a lot of socioeconomic reasons. And just like and just anti-African racism. We'll just ring fence that, although you could also talk about the Turkish and other things. But I don't think they're the same racism. I think they're built out of, there's definitely an ethnic outgroup thing you can find in lots of different cultures, but the source of that ethnic outgroup thing isn't the same. So I think it's when we perceive, if I take West Virginian racism and project it on a different culture, then I would be making some presuppositions about what is the source of that racism. and I'm going to get the details wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is ethnic outgrouping bad in general? Yes, but it's one of these things that we see in every culture, it cropping up all the time. And I like, how do you deal with that? But I would say, how does this relate to what you're thinking?
I have to object to that because the concepts like race don't even exist until the 17th century, right? And so they're very specific concepts.
All right, but ethnic outgrouping is very common.
Even that. I mean, you find completely different characterizations that don't run along lines of obviously genetics and biology. If you read, Roman and Greek history and people from medieval England and all sorts, these concepts do not exist because people don't think in these terms, even when they encounter people that we would obviously attribute and think of as being like a person from Africa or a black person or a Middle Eastern person, whatever. They do not think in these ways.
Are you saying that the phenotypes which we outgroup have changed? Or are you saying that people doing
phenotype is a Victorian term of biology? Like,
all right. What term would you prefer? Like visible characteristics?
No, the thing is, I'm fine using that term as long as we accept its contingent history and where it comes from, and not think that it gives us some Archimedean point outside of language where we're tethered into the structural race realism of the world or something. Because the ways of dividing up the world are modern and recent, and they're not universal. We know they're not. Empirically, there are even cultures in the Anglo-American world that are not like this.
But all right, so is your issue, I mean, I think there's tribal outgrouping. So are you saying that outgrouping doesn't...
More examples of racism than in the Bible Belt in America, but that doesn't mean all humans and all cultures are racist, or that this is like something that's innate or natural in people. I don't think you can justify it in that. Well, I think you can try to justify it in that way. I think the justification is both empirically false, and that even if it were the case, it wouldn't be the case.
So what paper are you quoting? I mean, like when we use the word empirically false, what paper are you referring to?
Field linguistic studies of people who have gone to live in tribes all around and have found out different things. I mean, one of the ones I'm most familiar with is Daniel Everett's work with the Piraha. But I mean, okay, I'll just go and get a book and go through all the sources, and I'll go, here's fucking like Viktor Blobochenko in 1974, and it'll establish nothing. But like,
all right, I think that is useful contextually because
why doing it to make this bullshit. So here's this point. Here's this book, right? Race: The History of an Idea in the West, and let's just read through the entire book and pull out some sources, because that's what we have to do now. Okay. Oh, he's a guy who puts the sources at the end of the chapter.
I hate when they do that.
You can't just go right to the back.
But you think you're done with you think you have that 5 more pages in the chapter, and then you're like, oh yeah, I get to skip these 5.
While Nathan's looking, Claire, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I think you trigger people, Mark, because of your frequent expressions of liberal guilt. I guess the zeitgeist is changing from that, and maybe liberal guilt. The expression of liberal guilt is no longer fashionable, I guess, and
I don't know
think
if it ever was, but go ahead. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
I think once upon a time it was quite fashionable, and I suppose.
Well, can I give you some context real quick on that? Because with regard to why I used the word stolen land, how that came up was Sam was on a tirade, as you recall, expressing the virtues of Protestantism, basically, and I said, and they came and did it all on stolen land. Yay, America! I think I said something along those lines, somewhat sarcastic, and wasn't. And then then for some reason that got picked up and was taken more seriously. And I mean, and then I only made the point at the end, I guess, was I said, well, if you need a gun to plant use the land, if you come across a piece of land and you want to plant a crop on it and you have to kill the people who are there to plant and harvest your crop, what is it if it isn't stolen? And nobody had an answer, of course. They just...
Their answer is, I don't care, but then they just like say a whole load of nothing to justify I don't care, basically.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's always why don't you return it? Why don't you give your house to... See, it's always some deflection on, let's just look at the thing as it is. We don't have to even do anything about it, but can we at least be honest about the thing that we're looking at?
Because they have got nothing else going for them in life except...
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, but Mark, on the question of
I agree with Claire.
imperialism... What?
You agree,
with Claire?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of it. And it ties into just the...
Paul?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. When you say the right thing, I'll agree with you.
Oh, that's nice.
He's a good liberal.
Yes, and possibly a good Catholic, but I suppose I was saying that Catholicism is also an imperial religion, and which is why I couldn't quite understand what
Catholicism is an imperial religion.
Catholicism is an imperial religion, right? So that was what puzzled me about why you thought the solution was Catholicism, because once upon a time all of Europe was Catholic, and Catholicism came from Rome, and it's
there were no wars. And there were no wars, and it was eternal peace at that time.
Well, when the empire is working properly, you get Pax Romana and Pax Britannia and Pax Americana and all those. But when it collapses, I guess it's kind of like
the Druid
big ship sinking, maybe sucking everything down with it. But I think Christianity is an imperial religion, and so is Islam, and frankly, so is Judaism. When you think of how the Jews conquered Canaan, and they it was occupied territory, but the Canaanites were idolaters, and the Jews were not, and because they obeyed the laws of God, they conquered Canaan and founded the ancient kingdom of Israel.
I think there's a lot of examples of, we could call it Catholic imperialism. I would also say there's a lot of instances of Catholic incorporating the existing cultures and trying to build cultural bridges. So I'm going to make the both and. There's definitely a brand of Catholicism which has had empirical tendencies, but then there's also, it's sort of the ground up. How do we bring what we believe to be true into the culture, into the local cultures? And that's so but
where do you sit on Pashamama, Paul? You got to...
What's that?
Where do you sit on Pashamama?
I don't understand what that is.
Oh, this is like a brain rot Catholic issue that basically establishes where someone sits on all of these issues, because it's like a wedge issue for Catholics. And it was in, I want to say, 2017, where Pope Francis invited some Amazonians to like do some dances and stuff to celebrate to celebrate God, but through their cultural understanding of God, which involved some like carvings and things like that. And some Catholics are like, cool, because God, my vision of God is so big, that of course they can relate to God in this way through, you know, their art and their native culture, and other Catholics were like, if unless they wash themselves white and speak Latin, then they're going to burn in hell forever, and this is disgusting.
I,
It shows the Pope is Satan.
I would say that sort of thing has a long tradition um, within the Catholic tradition of missionaries, where possible, trying to incorporate like the Native American missions around here. They use sage as incense in those churches, and they're incorporating some of the Native American symbolism within Catholicism. So I guess I would be online. This is not new. This is something very ancient. And I think there's
that idea of that vision of Catholicism, though, I think is a very appealing one that does have, you know, a kind of power to it, and it raises the moral standard and all that. I think the alternative vision is just quite clearly sectarian medieval cosplay, basically.
I think there's a clear tension between a sense of openness and understanding what is the center that unites us. So there's going to be some established lines in the identity. I don't even like the word identity within the tradition, we'll call it that. But I would say that there's this tension of, yes, are we giving up too much of what was passed on from Christ, since we're talking about Catholicism, in our sacred tradition, and the incorporating the goodness that people see in God in the past, in the other paths that God has shown himself, and how do we incorporate these? I think it's a tension, and if you're not holding that intention to some extent, you fall off one way or the other. Either you, and this is not just about Catholicism, you either are a hardliner, my way is the only way fundamentalist of various stripes, or you are so unanchored that every idea has equal sway, and then you lose your bearing in the thing. Does that make sense? Like you want to hold those in tension as a person.
I mean, it makes sense a little bit. I actually think it's I think it's a bit underdeveloped, maybe I'd put it, because
Fair.
what I think really matters is more maybe the values than the beliefs that people say, because and whether if those values are expressed in a totem pole or in Renaissance art, then that's fine as long as the values are what remains the same. But if what you take to be the values is the production of a sentence in Latin, then that's far too restricting for the range of possible ways of being that humans have.
And I would call that idolatry, and agree with you, Nathan.
Somebody asked the question, is there any example in human history where folk don't kill for land or beliefs or culture? And I think we go, yeah, maybe it's hard to find in history, but I think we started after World War II, we started to see the error of our ways and began to map out an alternative way for competing national interests to sort themselves more constructively. Of course, it was grossly imperfect, and there was the Cold War, and it got corrupted, and it never really it took off more than it could have within the West, but it's it's another failed attempt, right?
I would say
Um,
that I think that the question biases you to think about all the violence that we know of throughout history, and we often think of that because those are points of interest, because that's where there's harms done. But there's so many people that have lived in peace, and like all
yeah,
of the history of my life, I've never killed anyone. I've not lived perfectly, but
right.
I've never killed anyone over land, and I don't think I know anyone that's killed anyone over land. And
Well,
I think
do you remember? You probably have seen this, Nathan. As at the I've seen it somewhere, but I can't remember where to find the source offhand. Something about uh, old bones. Various fossils of human skeletons, human remains found by anthropologists, and they go back in prehistory, and so many of them show signs of blunt force trauma. That they were, it's by huge numbers. Like very few people apparently died of natural causes. Was apparently go back far enough was dying by something breaking your skull open or
Well, I think
or
most people throughout history have died of like malaria more than anything, and also like
yeah,
staph infections. But
yeah.
I mean, there's definitely there are a lot of fossil remains of people who have obviously died by being murdered that can be found. But there are some really good critiques that anthropologists have written of who wrote that book on like the arc of moral progress, like the better angels of our nature.
Hmm.
Is it
That's
Stephen Pinker?
Pinker, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of anthropologists have been very critical of
Maybe
this
that's where I picked that up. Okay.
because they've said, actually, when you're kind of aware of all of the latest research in these fields, and that's informing the way that you construct a narrative about whether or not violence has kind of tended towards better or worse, actually, it seems to just be kind of pretty evenly and randomly distributed over time, rather than there being
Mm.
a kind of like arc of just things getting better.
My sense is that, and I'm speaking as an economist here, I guess, because this is what I see in the economics, is that normal peacetime is slow and boring, and you get these large monumentous events that lead to sort of catastrophic things. And I feel like violence in history and revolutions and the like probably follow the same pattern of stretches of relative peace and then event triggered, or just build up of animosity triggered um, large violent events. So I think you're probably right, Nathan, on like things are not progressing one way or the other.
Oh, I think the idea
But
of progress is one of the most pernicious ones of our age. Personally, like it's such a weird myth we have. But
I I think it's but if you look narrowly enough, it's peace punctuated by large episodes of violence. And so it's not surprising that you've lived a peaceful life, and then we may come to a situation where all of us see dead bodies.
Well, and how catastrophic would it be if we catastrophic, not the right word. How tragic it would be if we woke up tomorrow and found ourselves in a repeat of, say, the Black Death, and your 50% of your town is what dies within a week of some horrible disease, and the bodies are so numerous, and the able bodies are so few that you can't even bury them all. Um, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, right? That our whole world
oh,
would we've lived these lives, like you said, Nathan. You never had to kill anybody to survive, and you don't expect to in the future. Um,
if
but
reform
wouldn't we say again?
So if reform don't get in, I tell you, when they're sharing videos of stuff happening in Minnesota, there is a part of my brain that's like, so now I have to plan for how I handle these people coming in my house to try and steal Niv. Like, what do I do? Do I kill them? Do I let them get away with it? But let's
Right.
leave that.
Right. Well, that's for me. That's always my hard line. My Christianity seems to my Christian charity stops when you threaten my family. I was telling somebody that
because
today.
your fatherhood, you, you've been given this responsibility of fatherhood, and within that responsibility, it's guarding, protecting your family. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I think I
And I
The
don't.
feel
And all I
easiest way
could
to make me
do.
violent would be to attack my children.
Yeah, that's kind of my appeal to the times we live in is don't push us to these extremes.
well,
Let's all
I'm not
try
saying
to go ahead.
I'm not saying I wouldn't act that way or feel that way. It's that I don't think it will ever sit right with me if I'm ever if that comes out in me. Does that make sense? Like I don't like that. Yeah.
It's not a happy outcome for you, is what you're
It's
saying.
called PTSD, and if you've talked to the guys in Iraq, I mean, I had a lot of I was of the cohort where many of my peers and some of my friends got sent over to Iraq, and not all of them came back spiritually whole because of what they had to do or felt like they had to do. And is what it is.
Let me just pivot a bit
Sorry.
to no, that's fine. No, I'm just going to pivot the discussion a little bit back to the title, and because I'm going to and say something possibly quite dangerous to myself, but I had a really interesting estuary session in Chino this last week, and it was interesting because I was able to be really honest about where I'm at in life right now, and just express in really plain, simple, non-dramatic ways that just um, I'm dealing with. My mom has had to go into hospice, and we're facing that decline, and the political situation, and I'm just in a state of I don't know if it's depression or just deep sadness, um, and and people actually came to me and they said over the course of things, they thanked me for being honest and expressing my feelings the way I did over the course of 2.5 hours or whatever. I don't feel I don't feel safe. Is that the right word? I'm going to probably get just baked for saying that, but I don't feel like this is this online, even my own channel. I don't feel like the relationships I've built in the corner online, with a few exceptions, Nathan being one, where I could express my sadness. Part of the, I'd love for somebody to actually say, why do you want to try to, let's go into this Catholic thing. And I'll talk to you about why I'm going to, part of it's just despair. Oh, we lost Paul. But we could talk about these things, but talk about them in a meaningful and personal way that Luke likes to talk about personal, but this isn't the safe, in a sense, this is, safe is maybe not the right word. It's not maybe.
It's that people are very thin-skinned and unable to actually clearly understand disagreements that they have. They just want to see, like they want to vice signal. Like that. People talk about virtue signaling, right? Which is it's kind of like crab in a bucket mentality. If you think back to all that 2016 discourse of, oh, look at them, they're pretending they care so much about racism or whatever. And then we've kind of come to this stage where what people do instead is like signal about how many vices they have of like, haha, I'm going to now like drink the milk and pretend to be racist, or I'm going to like, say some crazy Stephen Miller-ass thing about, whatever, to be like edgy or Curtis Yarvin type thing. And it's just like, see how unfazed I am at how many vices I have and how
Yeah. Well, it's, Luke asks, "Do you trust me?" To the degree that we have some relationship, but it's, you know, we have to endure. It's not just a. Sometimes a friendship is hearing things from a friend that I don't like to hear. And then also pushing back in a way, saying yes, yes, but, or sometimes it's a, have you thought about it this way? And let me tell you my experiences on this or that. Um, the What do you think, Nathan?
I just think it's like so weird to me. It's like people need safe spaces. You know, it's like the most all the stuff that's sort of like the right leaning people who are very weirdly supportive of MAGA, or if they're not supportive, they're weirdly unable to criticize them, moaned about on the left, right? Of like, oh, they just want safe spaces. They want group think. They can't disagree with the ideas. It's just exactly that. Like people who need to have every single concession granted, the environment structured in exactly the right way, just to say words on the internet. Like it's so pathetic to me, like to be a grown ass man and be like, I need some like kindergarten playground before I can have a discussion with someone and say words on the internet.
Hi, Brett.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Okay, how about yourself?
I'm doing okay. Sounds like I'm doing better than you. I hope you're doing better.
Yeah, we're here. We're surviving. We're going to keep at it. Um, there's something I've really wanted to talk about with regard to the MAGA um, progressive battle that we're in here in the United States, particularly with regard to protesters and it's not MAGA, it's actually ICE and protesters. But what some of this, and I don't know if we can even have the discussion, but there's video out there of there's a guy. It's a short clip, and he's got the face mask on and the weapon out, and he's parole. He's kind of standing on a perimeter, and he's being heckled severely by protesters who are yelling out, "You're worthless. You wouldn't be. Get a real job. Go get an education," that kind of thing. I'm a physician's assistant. This is from the protester. I'm a physician's assistant. I make $200,000 a year. And he looks at her, as best as you can tell through the mask, and just laughs at her and says, "How long did you go to school for that?" And she said, and she doesn't answer, of course. He says, and he just starts throwing out numbers or something, right? Guessing how many years she went to school to become a physician's assistant. He says, "I make $200,000 a year and I got a high school diploma." That dialogue to me is stuck in my mind quite a bit because what it indicates is it's really what we're, at least at some level for some people, this is a class war. And it reminded me too of analysis that was done by historians and sociologists around the Chicago riots of 1968, the police riots outside the Democratic National Convention. And the police just lost their minds. And they analyzed the police that rioted that day. And it's look it up. It's a legitimate police riot. The police lost control and just beat the holy crap out of these mostly college. They're either enrolled in college or college educated hippies outside the convention center, and they were working class high school educated guys, many of them already with families and so on. And it was a class conflict. And I want to talk. I think it'd be really useful to have a discussion around this division from a class. There's class resentment. I mean, what a dick move in a way. I mean, I would never lord it over anybody how much better educated or how smarter I am, how more intelligent I am, just to say it, even if they are being dicks. And it is, I mean, it on the other end, I mean, they may even have it coming, but how much more useful would it be to provoke in them their humanity instead of to see their sister in the woman that they're about to pepper spray, as opposed to just maximize the otherness of myself towards them and them towards me.
100%, Mark. 100%.
And I don't 100%. Let me tell you something. I've got a whistle, I'm wearing a whistle now with my crucifix. So that's where I'm at politically. Okay. So I'm firmly on the side of the opposition, so to speak. Getting a little feedback, Paul. So yeah. Okay. Sorry. But thank you, Brett. But yes, but don't be confused about where I stand. But damn it, we could do better. It sounded like I landed some. Did I stick the landing a little bit for you, Brett?
Yeah, no, I think we can do better. No question. I think both sides can do better. I just don't know how that works.
Okay, I know where you're going, Nathan. I understand.
I'm not going to get mad about it, but it's like, why? Which side is causing the problem right now, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on a perspective.
What do you like? Which perspective though?
I could probably steel man both sides. Do you think you could?
Yeah, and it's being able. I could steal. Do you want me to role play a Nazi?
No. You don't need to. Hold on. Let me ask you this though, Nathan. And this is this would be you may not know this guy in American circles. It's pretty controversial probably for some folks. I'm a James Carville fan. He's the political genius behind Bill Clinton's political success, and his very much it's politics. It's all about winning elections, adding to our numbers and subtracting from theirs, doing it legitimately, lawfully. We're not gonna cheat. We're coalition builders, right? It's always about building coalitions. And in just the pure practical sense, I make this argument around abortion too. I want to how do we reduce the number of abortions? How do we win elections? How do we add to our number and subtract from theirs? And it seems to me that the way to do it is to have that discussion, or to be as maximally human towards each other, or at least towards them, so that we might bring it out of them, out of the other, so that they can. I want to give my political opponents the fewest possible reasons not to be my friend. Am I making sense? Did that sentence make sense? I want you to feel bad for not being on my side, in a sense. And even if we're opponents, you might say, doggone it, I really like what you're saying, Parker, but I still gonna have to vote with this guy. Okay.
Mark, can I tell a story?
Sure.
So I grew up in steel country, Rust Belt, and there were I mean, there are a lot of steel workers, coal workers in our area. And in the early 90s, they were incredibly aligned strongly with the Democratic Party. And NAFTA happened. They didn't love NAFTA. And then people kept bringing in construction workers of questionable origins to do the building projects instead of giving it to union guys. Like, these are like stories in the local news when I was growing up. And then there were the basically steel dumping, and there's union strikes. And by the time I was in college, all the blast furnace had closed and everything had kind of been sold off. And George W. Bush was pushing legislation to support the steel workers. And so that was in the 2000 area. George W. Bush was reaching out to those blue collar workers who had been traditionally strong Democratic voters and union voters. So there was this outreach, like, okay, we're not on the same time, but we have changed our thing. And then you get to 2010, these areas are economically devastated more than they had been. And Donald Trump turns Ohio, West Virginia from blue-purple to bright red. And I mean, I grew up there, so I know what happened. I mean, other people may have other experiences. I don't think it was the Republicans were courting them and the Democrats were focused on other things. And so this is what has transpired is sort of this. I'm not politically affiliated, but what has transpired is problematic. But it came out of not like this great surge of Nazism, but sort of economic. Part of it was at least the part I experienced was the economic collapse of some of these industry bases in the globalization. And
there is nothing equivalent to that in Weimar Germany that can be pointed to.
Oh no!
There's no parallel.
Yes, and people don't sign up to be Nazis because they they have these deep ethnic hatred, although some people do. Primarily, it's a economic pull and political failings that kind of get you there. Now, does that justify the current stance of the Trump administration and the policies that they're undertaking? 100% no. I am completely politically homeless in this world. But I would say, like, but I also grew up with a lot of these, like, now old guys who were blue 20 years ago and now are Trump's biggest supporters.
Right.
So
thanks, Paul.
Sorry, I'll stop.
No. I just want to make sure I give Nathan. I overtalked him and I kind of interrupted his response to me. So I want to give him a chance to talk. If you want to, Nathan.
Can you remind me of the original point? Sorry, because I got.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I think it was, we were talking about, maybe it was, we said something about both sides could do better.
What
you didn't, that was a bit provocative.
I think that what I find very frustrating about this is that I see it as sort of like rhetorical, thought terminating cliche. That's like basically victim blaming, right? So you could find yourself in it doesn't matter, right? Like, I genuinely, and this is what kind of frustrates me about how distorted our political views are right now. Like, I am a conservative. Like, this is one of my favorite political philosophers, and people keep calling me some kind of like left-wing communist or something because America is so weird and people are so uneducated over there. I don't know why, but the point is that, like, those are my points of view. And so I, like, ideologically support movements that have had those points of view. So it's not about who is currently considered to be a left-wing party or currently considered to be a right-wing party. It's more about when one group is having awful violence and terror tactics used against them by the state in an unjust manner to perpetuate injustice in the world, whether that's a right-wing party, a left-wing party, whatever, right? To then say, well, the people who aren't carrying the weapons but are having them pointed at their head, who are being like blinded, trod on, all that kind of stuff, well, it's their fault for having the like bad, naughty ideas. Like, they have a punchable face. Well, they're the wrong skin color. Like, what? However you justify it is just ridiculous, right? Like, the blame, the responsibility is with the people pointing the weapon, going, like, transporting themselves to the communities of others with weapons and using those weapons on people. That is where the blame lies, not with the people who are on the end of those weapons for having the naughty ideas.
I feel like if we get here, we've already lost.
And that's
What do you
why I
mean?
just like the both sides things, right? Because it's a dog whistle back to Charlottesville and all that, where there were Nazis, and people who didn't like Nazis, and it's like, well, good people on both sides, and you know, it's all connected to like creating wedge issues around this, like, phrase it like both sides in issues that should not be both sides. There needs to be in a civil society boundaries that exclude certain types of violent and despicable politics.
Are you okay with neither side?
Yeah, that would be better. But the point is, if that functions as a way to stop you siding with the people who are being hammered by the violence of the state, right? Like, it's just what is that statement doing in that? You know, if someone say, let's just take it away from this, if you're on the end of Kristallnacht, right, and you say what the German state did there is really wrong and this is really worrying and troubling, and you go, but look, there's some pretty crazy communists in Germany at the time. It's just a useless statement. Like, you need to engage.
So Nathan, I think this is really good. This is a good direction, because, all right, had Nazism not succeeded in Germany, would you have had a similarly destructive communist regime with some historic parallels? I mean, again, that's a hypothetical, but it's worth thinking about. I go with neither side, because there are many dimensions in which I see, as soon as either side gets the levers of power, they are pulling them against their enemies in ways which are questionable for sustainable society and like continued peace. Now, they're different places, but
right. Let's put it one way, right? Just to not use. So we're using these examples to reason about U.S. politics, say, at the minute. Okay. Now, when Biden was in power, did Trump get put in prison? No. Right. Now, that guy committed so many crimes, so many impeachable offenses. There was a goddamn insurrection plot. Okay. Now, that if Biden were actually as corrupt as they make out, he would have been goddamn hung, drawn, and quartered within a year. Within a year. Never mind being able to run again, getting to the end of it. Never mind, like, keep a Republican as the head of the CIA. Make sure that there are judges who aren't politically fit. Like, all these chances and things that would get. I'm not saying they're not corrupt. They are messed up and corrupt in their own ways, but there are levels to the corruption, and there's levels to the extent that they're willing to go to manipulate things and to seize power and to consolidate power. And they wanted to have some kind of due process and justice in the courts, for example, around these things, which is why it was so inefficient and why they weren't able to prosecute in time. And that you don't have that parity the other way around. Like, there is there's corruption, but there's a complete disparity and disproportion.
At some point, I want to hear from Brett, but why do you think, and anybody can answer this, but why do you think some people can look at January 6th and say insurrection, and some people will say that wasn't an insurrection, it was something else, or legal protest or something? Or, what's at work within us, our society, I guess you could say, that we can look plainly at the same events and radically interpret them differently. Maybe let's give Brett a chance to talk.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Paul. Let's just see if Brett has.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember that day, and I remember watching the news, and I remember thinking, this looks a little bananas. Obviously, other videos came out, and then further videos come out, and I'm like, well, I'm not getting the whole side of this. I heard left wing. The news really was more left wing leaning. I mean, they were more framing it just the way that you guys were talking about, as far as it being an insurrection. And I was kind of wondering whether it was or not. And I also listened to right wing documentaries, not propaganda stuff, but like watching films of a bunch of people pummeling single dudes, like the same thing that we saw in Minneapolis. And I'm going, what? I mean, what? I mean, and I saw a guy get shoved off the wall by one of the officers. And then, I mean, it was just the things that I saw in this video were not being shown in the mainstream media. So I think that people started losing trust in what people say. Can't you see with your own eyes? It's like, no, we can't. And I'll use the Minneapolis thing, for example, with the guy that got shot. I was telling my dad, I was saying, if you got real close with the situation, and you're like, okay, only looking at the fact that this cop is this border patrol agent is having a battle with this guy, and he's got a gun, and he ends up shot. From that perspective, you would say he shouldn't have done that, but he deserved what he got. Like I'm saying, that's how close you would be looking. Then you look out further and you say, well, that border patrol started the violence by pushing the woman, and by right, this guy getting in between them is a legal right to stand between her and him. So it's like, wait a minute, legally, actually, he has a case here that he should not have been shoving that woman, and he was, putting himself in between the woman and the border patrol. And then you span out even farther, and you realize this whole area at that time was chaotic. Maybe they thought they were losing control. Again, the perspective keeps shifting, and this is just with one single camera.
Would you trust city authorities to investigate that event?
Well, I mean, let's be honest, though. I mean, at that moment, right? They didn't want police doing anything to help
kick the police out.
No.
I'm saying no. I mean, the federales, so to speak, the federal government on site took over the investigation, and the investigation.
I agree, 100%.
And they pushed out local authority, even though homicides are state local.
So here
jurisdiction.
In Florida, right? In Florida, the reason, and you hear this on the news, the people that debate this stuff, they're like, why doesn't it happen here? Why doesn't it happen, somewhere else? And it's, well, the police here are literally working virtually almost in the same cars with ICE agents to go ahead and get and apprehend the people they need to apprehend. They're actually literally working on they're literally told to stand down, stay away from these scenes, don't help them out. So I'm saying it gets to this tension point where the public kind of gets fed a narrative that, oh, my governor is standing up to this federal situation. And because maybe it is more blue, it becomes more hostile. I just want to back up for a minute, though, if you'd let me.
I think there's a lot of
hold on, just real quick, because
because you've made a lot of points there that I
understand you're going to disagree with me. I understand that, but let me finish, because you have been talking.
Made so many points.
Okay, just hold on, Nathan. Trust me. I'll give it. Everybody. All right. All right.
I'll make a
I really
quick
want
point.
to. I want to hear what you want to finish your thought, Brett, and then I want to hear from
Yeah,
Nathan and then
I'm,
Paul.
I'm fine with that. I was quiet when he was talking. So I was thinking about how you got upset with the whole both sides thing. I mean, I remember when it was Biden and they were saying the same thing about the riots and the fires in the cities and how it was chaos, right? Now it wasn't the federal government, it wasn't the state doing it, but I was thinking about a marriage. Now I would ask you, Nathan, do you think a marriage is a 50-50 thing? Would you say that that's the way that it's depicted? It's a 50-50 thing?
I'm not even sure I can interpret the question. Like, I don't know, like, with respect to what? Like, to height?
In a
to-
relationship, is it 50-50 between you and your wife?
I just can't make. I don't think it's a meaningful question. I'm not saying this to be tricky. Like, do you mean like? Are you saying, do I think all people should do equal amounts of housework? Maybe in some relationships, not enough. Do it.
Not
Should all
work,
people-
everything about the relationship.
There's not an answer to that. It doesn't even make sense. I don't think.
It's
All right.
more likely to be every other number than 50-50.
Why did you ask that question, Brett?
Yeah,
Why
go
did
for
you?
it.
Why did you ask? I'm curious. Why did you ask
Because
that
I
question?
believe that most people do think it's 50-50. I think most people think, whether it's the emotional stuff, whether it's the physical stuff, the financial stuff, the idea.
And then how does that apply to what you were talking about?
So the reality, though, in a marriage, a successful marriage, if you talk to people that are successfully married, they'll tell you, no, the successful way is it's 100%, 100%. Meaning I'm giving 100% and I'm not tallying your percentage because I love you and I'm committed to you and I want this to work. And that's what I mean about both sides. I think they are tallying the other side. And I think that's how we get so violently opposed to each other, because all we're doing is seeing what the other side isn't doing, and that's not going to have a successful relationship in this politics world. I mean, I know it seems so. This is lowbrow, 100%. It's not intellectual, Nathan. I'm just straight up saying that you cannot constantly be standing on one side and looking at what the other side is not doing and saying this justifies the XYZ. That's how marriages fail, right? So that's all I'm saying. That's
so would it benefit us to stop counting all the offenses and stop trying to? Would it be? Could we find a way to be more generous with each other? Brett?
I mean, that's obviously. I mean, obviously, this is the other part about, and this is my Calvinism slipping out. I do trust God. Yeah, I don't know if you saw. I put in the comments on that stream you guys had, the full prayer, the Serenity Prayer. People love quoting the AA version, but that full prayer is much more impactful. Most people here know this, right? The whole prayer. I mean, I can read it. It's not long if you want me to.
Sure, go ahead,
right.
and then we'll give Nathan.
Yep,
Paul a
100%.
chance.
So, and the other part about this prayer, because it was brought into recovery, is it was individualized. So, because you have to say I messages, not talk for someone else. Because when you talk for someone else, you know what I mean? So it was therapeutic. So they turned a lot of we's into me and a lot of us's into I. But the original prayer was, God, give us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, the courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish one from another, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as we would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy, so that we may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. And I think that for me, I do know God has it. At the end of the day, there's going to be horrible people, degenerate people in politics, not in politics, in the streets, not in the streets, in our churches, not in our churches. And I'm okay with knowing that God's got a plan for it all. I trust his sovereignty in it. I do want to be as hospitable as I can be to my brothers in Christ, and I want to be as hospitable as I can be to people that aren't Christians, and try to live an example. I'm not perfect, of course not. I get sassy with Nathan sometimes in the comments. You know what I mean? So I'm not perfect. I get triggered just like Nathan does. So anyway, I talked enough. I just thought it was
That's
important.
Good. That's good. Thank you. Okay, Nathan, I promised you a chance to respond.
I've got a
However you
question
want.
to follow up from the points that you were just making about like the importance of loving people and justice in your politics and things like that. And I wonder, would you say then that you support or don't support the current presidential administration and its policies and actions?
I think just like the other administration, I support some policies and I disagree with some.
Would you vote them out if there was an election today?
Like if we could rewind and do the same election?
Or like right now, if there,
Well,
I mean,
who would be the opposing candidate?
You could say if you could rewind and do it with the knowledge that you have now of how things would play out.
I probably would vote the same way. And the only reason why is you brought up a good point, or maybe it was Paul that brought the good point up about the way the table got tilted upset a lot of people. And then when the election came and they were campaigning, the things they were campaigning on was not, it was like, wait a minute, you guys think that everybody was okay with a lot of this stuff, to the point where you guys were putting all your chips in on some of the same policies that they had in the past, and they lost. Now, I do have certain stances that I disagree with some of the guys here on the panel and about abortion and about
how about other, could I ask on policy?
But my point is that there are certain things that, and again, the incendiary stuff, transgender, all of
do you mind if I ask on the policies that are of concern to me, though? So, like, do you support the sending of ICE into Minnesota?
Yeah.
Do you support the actions in Venezuela?
You mean them taking out Maduro?
I guess we could separate the two.
Well, I mean, because there's a lot going on there, right?
Yeah, maybe the missile attacks as one thing, and then we could have the kidnapping of the president as another thing. Do you support both of those? Is there a difference?
Well, one of the things that I learned about Iraq was that I had, I got caught up just like everybody did. I mean, even Congress, believing a narrative, right?
Sure.
And then when I found out the narrative wasn't true, I was like, well, why would we do this? And then I started, understanding like it's not just arbitrary, and it isn't just about money, but like it reminded me of 7 Days of the or was it 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford?
Honestly, I'm kind of forgetting what my own question was.
I understand. So the thing about it is it's complicated. I don't know everything. You don't know everything.
But then you could just say, I don't have a view, maybe.
No, I have a view.
So what is that view? That's what the question is, right? And
well, I believe that from my perspective, the way it seems right now, it doesn't seem like it's a problem. It makes sense to me. They took out a guy.
What if, Nathan? Let me try something.
They took a guy out that really wasn't elected.
So you support it,
and he's a drug cartel guy.
So you do support it, yeah.
So what if? Okay, what if I said under a certain set of circumstances, I could support ICE in Minnesota and I could support Maduro's removal. My problem is all in the details, the how and So why would Mark Parker ever support immigration and customs enforcement in Minnesota? Well, partly to, I could imagine a situation where if we had the right constraints, we had the proper level of transparency, judicial review, adherence to constitutional norms, values, I could see where ICE could fulfill its mission in any state of the union in a way that I could maybe not be thrilled about, but support. Because I understand that if, I've heard this phrase used, if liberals don't enforce immigration laws, fascists will. That's an exaggeration. It's polemic, but I think you get what I'm meaning. To avoid extreme abuses of the law, I'm willing to negotiate a way to at least satisfy a majority of Americans and give them a sense that, yes, the law is being respected with regard to immigration. With regard to Maduro and Venezuela, again, the devil's in the details for me. The dude's corrupt. He's robbing his people blind. He's creating havoc in the region. There was even some talk of him threatening a neighbor over their oil, a much smaller nation. The United States unilaterally going in the way it did. Yes, of course, because we have the power and the abilities, we just because we can do it the way we did it doesn't mean we should do it the way we did it. But a negotiated, because there are associations of American states. We could have worked with Latin American countries and our neighbors in the region to execute the mission in a way that was internationally lawful, respectful, and not disruptive of norms. And I could support that. Again, thrilled? Would I rather us not be involved in other nations? Corrupt or good? Of course. But, does that connect at all, Nathan? Am I or anybody else? And then I'm going to have to, after Nathan and Brett respond, and then Paul, we're going to wrap it because I've got to go deal with stuff. But does that make any sense, or am I just being a big mush?
No, it makes sense. Like I think you're right that something more important than any of the particular policies, which is the institutions and even the kind of like what would you call them, the practices or the kind of norms in politics that act as
disciplines.
Yeah, once those kind of like provide boundaries on how people conduct themselves within politics, and when they take a longer time to change and be violated, and this is a point that that this is why MAGA can hardly be considered a conservative movement, right? It's very revolutionary, but because conservatives always make this point that when we're in good times and we have these things that are the product of long historical processes, Chesterton's fence, you come across a fence in a field that says, here's a bull, keep out. You don't kind of just go, oh, some idiot must have put this up. You kind of go, oh, someone probably put that there for a reason. And that's what a lot of our political institutions are like. The reason why I was very interested in Brett's particular views on some of those policies is because I think that those policies are quite clearly very violent policies and often involved in killing. My personal view would be murder, but murder is obviously related to being able to have a legal institution that's functional enough to prosecute people who perform certain kinds of actions. And so I find that then very hard to square with one of the criticisms that was raised of people who have been saying mean things about the MAGA movement politically, or saying that movement is bad, is like, well, they're not being loving enough, right? They're not. We need to love each other. Like that's part of why this metaphor of a marriage, like you're all in. You need to love each other. But then it sounds like you're saying there is nothing that the state could do where that would outline that anyone who supports those actions has gone too far. It sounds like the statement is tread on me, right? It sounds like the statement is to say yes harder as the boot of the state comes down on your freedoms and your rights. And I mean, I personally, I mean, don't find it a good way of reasoning about this situation or thinking about interpreting it, right? I think there's room for disagreement, but some things clearly situate people in the bad guy camp, right?
Okay, thank you. And then Paul, and then
Yeah,
Brett, if you have a final thought, and we got to go.
At some point, like, I go to a radical subsidiarity on these things. Like, I need to worry about the things that I have direct agency over, and I don't really. I think the cultures. I think I'm going to agree with Nathan and say the cultures is not great in these leadership things from what I can see as a outsider, and this is not where my day-to-day living. These are not the people I associate with, that is political leaders in Washington and in the state capitals. I think the set of issues you decide to highlight greatly change the discussion, and I feel like there's the distraction issues over here, which is ICE and Minneapolis. Not to say that they aren't meaningful things, but then there's a whole bunch of stuff happening in the tech regulatory space, which is materially impactful on how we live, which is also being decided quietly. And there's a lot of the money that was funneled in the last election was not about the headline issues. It was the fifth page. We don't have newspapers anymore, but the fifth page of the newspaper type issues that were driving the money flows, that were driving the election. And then these things that are flashing up here are often like distraction points to it's mind control.
I definitely agree there. We have a lot of reflection to do on what brought us to his place. And it may be up to the historians ultimately to sort through much of it, but we don't have time. In that sense, we have to be reflective as best as we can here and now.
This conversation was really good, Mark, because I feel like Nathan and I never agree on anything, and we were largely, and I think there's a lot of common ground that we came to. And I think, Mark, I think you demonstrated in this conversation that you do see the place that other people in the spectrum are coming from, and you still wear your whistle. And I think there's growth. I think the key thing that makes everyone mad is that the image of their head of Mark Parker as this guy who just doesn't get it was, I think, rectified in this conversation in a lot of ways if we listen to the nuance of what you're saying. And it's just like we take these one things like land, who owns the land, and then we blow that out into huge projections of images, and then we get angry at that projection. And I think, like, Nathan is more nuanced. I didn't realize he was a Burkean conservative. And Mark, I mean, hopefully I don't know, I probably came off worse in this discussion.
No, I think everybody acquitted themselves well.
And this is the example of what will make it better. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, that's thank you. And Brett, can you wrap us up and land the plane in like 30 seconds to a minute?
No problem. No, I just appreciate the conversation. I appreciate you letting me be on. I definitely think that, as Christians, we shouldn't be aligning with a particular party. We should look at the policies, like I think all of us are kind of doing. I think Nathan's right, that the conservatives got hijacked. I think the Democrats got hijacked. I think that's why a lot of people left in different ways, and went to different parties for their own reasons. But I definitely am more about, I don't really care. I care about the politics, and I care about who's in president. I do care about that stuff. But what I was talking about more so is us lower level people, the people, how we're supposed to respond, the 100% towards each other. Obviously the people in power, they're not going to do that. Obviously the people that are trying to get them out of power, they're not going to do that. I'm just talking about us average people. That's all.
Well, I think we take some of the wind out of their sails when we can have a conversation like this and leave as friends and plan for future conversations, right? And they may not always go so well. Sometimes they may be contentious. Welcome to everybody. Everybody here see Deadwood? There's this scene when Mrs. Bullock arrives in town, and Sheriff Bullock and Swearingen are having a deadly battle in the street, and Swearingen, the pimp, is about to murder the sheriff with a knife, just as the wife and their sons come upon the scene. And he's stopped. He's, in his words, Swearingen is unmanned by the eyes of the child, and he stops short of killing the man, and says, "Welcome to Deadwood. It can be contentious." If you haven't seen it, you can find it on YouTube. I guarantee it. It is, of all the TV shows that ever existed on planet Earth, that one describes, I think, America better than any.
They need to bring it back.
They did. I wish they did. Yeah, they tried. And unfortunately, the creator died on us. God bless him. All right, guys. Thanks. And stay in touch. Nathan, always, you know where to find me. And all you guys, let's talk some more again. I am going to play us out on a song. Why not? And I got a minute to do that. Let's see. God bless everybody.
Oh, Ron Copperman walks through the morning haze with a bounce in his step and a laugh that stays. Got fire in his eyes like a holy revival. Says he's Pentecostal but he dances in style. Ron Copperman sings as he lifts up his pint with a hallelujah laugh and a twinkling light. He's the heart of the pub with his tale so colossal. Oh, Ron Copperman, my favourite Pentecostal. He cheers to the sky, then he downs his stout. Says a little spirit lad